Every air show starts with two words that decide whether the event happens at all. Certificate of Waiver. This video walks through the 10 things a first-time organizer has to understand about that document, and about the role standing behind it, the Airboss. None of this is optional reading. The FAA built the Certificate of Waiver process and the Airboss position within it to keep aerobatic flight over a crowd from becoming a gamble. Skip a step, assist and stand the chain of authority, or wait too long to start paperwork, and the show doesn't happen. Or worse, it happens without the safety margins that keep spectators and performers safe. Treat this as the checklist you wish someone had you before your first event. 10 points in order, starting with the document that makes everything else legal. Start with the document itself. FAA Form 7711-2, the Certificate of Waiver or Authorization, is what legally permits aerobatic flight below 1,500 feet above ground level over a crowd. Without it, that altitude restriction stands, and no announcer script or sponsor contract changes that. Your local flight standard district office issues the COW only after a review process that includes coordination with your team and a site survey of the actual venue. That waiver is not a blanket permission slip. It's valid for your specific event, at your specific site, on your specific dates. Every performer flying that weekend, every maneuver in their routine, and the show itself all operate under the conditions written into that one document. Lose sight of that, and you lose sight of why the rest of this list matters. Simple version. No COW, no show. With the COW established, the next thing to understand is who actually runs the airspace on show day. The Airboss. This is the FAA's designated point of contact for all air operations during your event, and it's a legal role, not a ceremonial title handed to a respected pilot for the program. The Airboss holds operational authority over the aerobatic box itself, and carries responsibility for every aircraft operation, every safety call, and compliance with the COW from the first engine start to the last landing. If your mental image of the Airboss is someone who welcomes the crowd and introduces acts, reset that picture. The introduction duties are secondary. Above the show line, this person is your safety officer, and that authority is what the next few points build directly on. That authority isn't assigned loosely. It's written into the paperwork by name. The FAA issues the Certificate of Waiver to a specific, named individual, and your Airboss is legally listed on that document. This creates a real administrative obligation for organizers. If your Airboss changes after you've submitted your application, notify your FSDO immediately. Don't assume the role transfers automatically to whoever steps in, even if they're equally qualified. The FAA needs to know and, in most cases, needs to approve the change before show day. That also rules out walk-in substitutions. You cannot swap Airbosses the morning of the event without prior written authorization from your FSDO. Treat any change to this role with the same seriousness you treat a change to the waiver itself, because legally, it is one. Now, timing. This is where a lot of first-time organizers get into trouble. FSDO processing timelines for a certificate of waiver are not guaranteed, and the realistic window runs 90 to 120 days or longer, depending on your district's workload and how complex your site is. Build in margin well beyond that 90-day minimum. A late submission doesn't just mean a delay in getting your paperwork back. It means real risk of show cancellation, because the COW cannot be expedited on your timeline no matter how much advertising you've already sold or how many performers you've booked. If you're planning an event for next season, the work on this document needs to start now, not once the site survey and performer roster are finalized. Lead time is the one variable you control completely, so use it. Once your application is moving, the FSDO's site survey becomes the foundation for everything physical about your show. That survey establishes the aerobatic box dimensions, the crowd line placement, and the distances between the show line and your spectator areas. These aren't planning suggestions. Once recorded on the COW, they become legally binding conditions that every performer in your lineup has to fly within. That has a practical consequence organizers sometimes miss. You cannot adjust this geometry on show day, even if a last-minute logistics problem makes a different layout more convenient. The box, the lines, and the distances are fixed at the moment the COW is issued. If your site changes between the survey and the event, new construction, a moved parking area, anything that shifts the physical footprint, that's a conversation to have with your FSDO well before show weekend. With the box defined, the next question is, who's allowed to fly how close to it? And that comes down to performer categorization. The COW recognizes 3 tiers. Category 1 covers entry-level competition waiver holders, and is the tightest altitude and distance limits from the crowd and the box edges. Category 2 is for experienced competitors who've demonstrated proficiency with more relaxed limits than Category 1. Category 3 sits at the top. Waiver holders with the highest demonstrated precision and operational latitude in the box. These categories aren't paperwork formalities. They determine what a given performer can legally do in your show. Verify every acts category before you finalize scheduling, because booking a routine that exceeds a performer's category isn't a scheduling error. It's a COW violation. Performers are categorized, the box is set, and now everyone involved needs to hear the same briefing before engines start. The safety briefing is required before every single show day. No exceptions, no shortened versions for a repeat performer, and no sending a proxy in your place. This briefing covers airspace, communications procedures, emergency response, divert fields, and weather minimums, all in one sitting. Every performer and every key member of your ground and air team has to attend, and they have to sign in. That sign-in sheet isn't a formality either. It's an official record the FAA can reference if something goes wrong. If someone shows up late and misses the briefing, they don't fly that day. That's the standard, and it's non-negotiable for good reason. Speaking of things covered in that briefing, weather minimums, and they deserve their own point because organizers underestimate how absolute they are. If conditions fall below the COW minimums, the show stops. Full stop. The COW specifies a minimum ceiling and visibility as legal operating conditions, not general guidelines that flex for a big crowd or a tight schedule. The Airboss makes that call, not you and not your event committee. Your job as organizer, in that moment, is to support the decision without applying pressure. No arguing about ticket sales, no reminding anyone about the TV crew waiting in the stands. Building that expectation into your team's culture before show day matters just as much as the weather minimums themselves, because the moment usually arrives with an audience already in their seats. Weather is one kind of contingency. The COW also requires you to plan for the ones nobody wants to think about. It mandates documented emergency action plans covering an aircraft in distress, a crowd incursion, a mid-air collision, and fire. Those are scenarios the FAA expects you to have already worked through on paper, not scenarios you improvise if the day goes wrong. Your groundside response, medical, fire, and security has to be coordinated directly with the Airboss's airside emergency plan, so the two sides of the operation aren't working from different assumptions if something happens. These plans need to be written down, briefed at the safety session we just covered, and rehearsed before show day. An emergency plan that exists only in someone's head isn't a plan the FAA or your team can rely on. That brings us to the last point, and it's really the one that ties the previous 9 together. During operations, the Airboss's authority is absolute. As the organizer, you control logistics, scheduling, and program order. You control sponsors, media, and public relations. You control gates, crowds, and vendors. The Airboss controls something narrower but non-negotiable. The aerobatic box and the show line, all aircraft operations and their sequencing, and show stop authority, including weather calls and emergencies. When those two domains conflict, and eventually they will, the Airboss wins. Build that boundary into your planning from day one, not as a hierarchy you tolerate, but as the safety structure the whole event depends on. Understand these 10 points before your first show, and you'll spend a lot less time being surprised by your own paperwork.